time for the next in our topical talks, and one could argue that the subject today is probably one of the most important things of our life here on Earth. And I'm talking about soil, the earth in which our crops are grown. And the Soil Association is the charity that digs deeper in order to transform what we eat, how the land is farmed, and how we can all take care of our natural world. And I'm pleased to say that the Chief Executive is Helen Browning, who lives and farms in North Wiltshire. And Helen is with us today. Hi there, Helen.
Hello, Mark.
Well, the Soil Association, I have to say, is a well-known name. I think many of us will be familiar with it, but possibly not exactly sure what you do. So perhaps you could start off our chat by giving us some brushstrokes about what you guys actually do.
One of the world's best secrets, I think. Yeah, so the Soil Association was founded in 1946, so we're celebrating our 75th anniversary this year. Yep. And it was founded to explore the relationship and the interconnection between the health of our soil, the health of the plants that grow in it, the animals that feed on them, and ultimately the health of humanity. And so it was always just interested in that interconnection and was founded to sort of inform the world about the research that was going on in that field. And it was all based on the work of a man called Sir Albert Howard, who went out to India in 1900 to teach the peasants how to farm, as the colonial way was in those days. And he got out there to run this research centre and found that he could learn far more from them than he could teach, actually. And so he became very interested in some of the tribes out there and how healthy they were according to how they were growing their food. So a tribe called the Hunza, who were using compost grown food, were very healthy, very strong. That was the beginning of the whole organic movement, philosophy and idea, and the beginning really of the Soil Association too.
But you've moved on since then though, haven't you? I mean, you know, looking at your website, your sphere of operation is very comprehensive nowadays, isn't it?
It's really broad. So we work both to change the way we farm, because that's how we're ballsing up the world through our farming largely. And so getting that right. And obviously we've got a long history in organic, but also changing the way we eat and consume things too, because if we don't get that side of the equation right, we can't actually farm in a way that's going to look after nature, look after climate, and feed ourselves well. So we work in schools, teaching about growing and cooking, getting kids out onto farms, for instance. We have a whole big school education program. We work to help cities transform their food culture. And then we also work with farmers and with foresters. We have a certification department which actually certifies forests all around the world in 62 countries. So we're involved at the very practical end of farming and growing, and also, as I say, in terms of what people eat and how they live. So lots of programs supporting research and communicating, educating. It's quite a broad field. It's a really exciting place to be, actually, because we're at that intersection between agriculture, the environment, animal welfare, and food and diet.
So you're primarily UK based, but from what you're saying, you work over the world.
Yeah, so we're UK based as a charity, but our certification department does get involved in forestry certification globally. And we obviously have big networks across the globe with like-minded organizations encouraging each other, sharing learnings and that kind of thing.
Now, you're a farmer as well, and I believe you've got other strings to your bow in terms of business. But, you know, how much time do you spend on this as chief exec? And what about the other business? I mean, farming and everything else, retail, because I understand you have a farm shop, has had a terrible battering with COVID. But I mean, how do you split your time? I suppose that's the question I'm trying to ask.
Well, most of my time is Soil Association time, so I try and fit my farming and other things into weekends and evenings and that kind of stuff, because the Soil Association is all engrossing. It's just, you know, there's so much to keep an eye on. But the farming keeps me sane, actually. And, you know, getting out onto the farm, I've just been out for a good walk just now, and it's just fantastic to remember every day why we do this stuff, why it's important, and to be kind of re-inspired by the farm. And then we also make products from our own cattle and pigs and other things, and we've got our brand in supermarkets and places, and we run a hotel on the on the farm and a pub, which now has a shop, as you say. So there's all sorts of business ventures going on here, and it's lovely to have that mix of a really practical life, you know, being at the coalface and trying to make it work in real life, as well as you know, trotting off to Westminster to try and change policymakers' ideas about how they're going to do things in the future.
So I suppose, and I must ask you about your personal circumstances, in as much as I understand that your family and you started being a vegetarian, I think it was literally when you were a very young child. You know, this is a passion that you've had all your life.
No, not a vegetarian.
Oh.
No, so I got very interested in the environment and how we were changing that through farming when I was a child. And I grew up here. My father farmed here. We're tenants of the church. And so I grew up on the farm here and became increasingly concerned about the way the wildlife was disappearing. And when I went off to do my degree in agriculture, I came across these sort of state-of-the-art factory farms, which we were told was the future, and I just thought, I don't want any of that. So that led me to be interested in organic farming, which led me to be interested in the Soil Association, and that's how it all started.
Brilliant. So you mentioned there Westminster, and I would think that the role that you have in the Soil Association itself, there is a sense of lobbying there. You are there to perhaps put policies in front of government and say, oi, you know, you should be thinking about this, rather than just helping people with their own farms, or people like me with my back garden. You know what I mean? So there's that sense of real political ambition.
Yes, very much so. And this is a time when that ambition has to really find it gets some traction, because, you know, as we've left the EU, we're making up our farming policies for the first time in, you know, 40 or 50 years. So it's a time where things could go dramatically right or dramatically wrong. So it's really important to get new ideas into the mix. One of those things, something I've become very passionate about over the last decade or so, is agroforestry, how we bring trees into the farmed environment rather than just thinking of them in woods and forests over there and then our broadacre farming over here. So we've been experimenting with that on the farm here, and it's one of the things we're trying to put forward as a real potential solution for the future, and that governments ought to back now.
Okay, is that something that members of the public can do as well? Plant a few trees in the back garden if they've got the space?
I think, you know, planting trees in the right place, of course, the right tree in the right place is always a good thing to do. So if you've got the opportunity, both to let grasses grow, because so many of our insects require long flowering grasses and plants. So I'm always trying to encourage people to not be too tidy in their gardens. Stop that mowing of the lawn. Let your lawns rewild a bit. And yes, if you haven't got many trees around, plant a few. And I think, you know, trees are wonderful because obviously we can eat a lot of things from trees as well, as can animals. So as well as mopping up carbon, they're also providing a habitat for wildlife. They're providing timber and food for us too. So lots of reasons to be planting trees.
So it's, as you say, it's not just about farms and farming and all this. So all of us can play our role now.
Yeah.
So let me ask you another sort of vaguely personal question. As much as what's sort of top of your inbox at the moment? Is it you know, the present government? Are you lobbying them, or are you turning your attention perhaps towards things like the United Nations climate conference that's coming to the UK this year? I mean, where do you see the next few months going?
Well, we're doing all of those things, but of course, it's the run up to the COP that is the really important time, where government is really thinking, okay, what are we going to put on the table here? How can we show our leadership? So it's a great time to be influencing and trying to ensure that what we call nature-based solutions are as big a part of the discussions as the sort of high-tech stuff or the other things that people might be putting forward. So I think, you know, for us, it's about, we've talked about trees already, but it's about soil and the importance of actually protecting and revitalizing our soils, because we hold more carbon in our soils than we do in anything else on land. You know, there's more carbon in soil than there is in the atmosphere and in our trees. So actually not just stopping the decline in the erosion and the sort of evaporation of that carbon from our soils, which has been going on for decades, and starting to, as we call it, sequester, lock up more carbon in our soils, is a very important part of the mix. And we need to be getting governments to be focused on those things, which will not only help us prevent climate change, but will also mitigate the impacts of climate change as and when it does arrive, because we're getting rid of it, we're already seeing it. So a good soil with lots of organic matter holds moisture for longer, so your plants don't dry out. It stops floods because it acts like a sponge and stops the water running into our rivers too quickly. So there's lots of reasons why, as part of the COP, we need to be getting soils up the agenda.
Okay, well, we wish you well with that. And then we just heard recently in the last 2 or 3 weeks that major vehicle manufacturers are going all electric. I mean, is that something you welcome as well?
Yeah, hugely. I mean, you know, decarbonising the grid is crucial, and then getting us off fossil fuels as quickly as possible. And, you know, it feels like a time now when there is the possibility of rapid change, with Biden in the White House, China coming in now and talking about going carbon neutral by 2060. I mean, there's some extraordinary things happening in the world. It does feel like we've upped our ambition. And in a way, I think COVID has also shown us how quickly we can react and do things, and how much money we can deploy at it if we think we really need to. So I think we're all keen to see that urgency translate from COVID into climate. And at the same time as focusing on climate, we keep saying we need to be focused on biodiversity too, because if we just do things that are good for climate and not things that are good for nature, we'll get some pretty perverse outcomes. So it's really important to be thinking about climate and nature and human health, and be finding solutions that play into those 3 big crises we're facing.
And everybody has a part to play in that, don't they, really, I suppose?
Everybody does. And, you know, I think we're all starting to think harder, and COVID, again, being in lockdown, I think has helped us think that through a bit more, given us a bit more breathing space sometimes to think about it. How can we reduce our own footprint? What do we need to do to actually minimize our impact? And then how can we actually be pushing governments harder and faster and giving them the mandate to change now, and to make the long-term investments we've got to make?
And presumably a lot of that mandate will come from your members. I mean, do you have a lot of members? And question A, do you have a lot of members? And question B, what happens locally? I mean, you talk very enthusiastically about Westminster and the bigger picture, global picture. But I mean, if I'd signed up in Gloucestershire, for instance, what do I get for my money?
So we're not brilliant at local groups. We have got some local groups, but it hasn't been where we've invested a huge amount of our time. Okay. And our membership is still rather pathetically small. You know, we have about 11 or 12,000 public members. So it's small compared to the membership of a lot of the other bigger environmental NGOs. Really keen for more. So, you know, if people find some of this stuff resonates, do join us. You know, I think we like all organisations like CPRE and so many others, we can only do what we do when we've got the members to support our endeavours.
Helen, I think that's a very positive note on which to end. So thank you very much for your time today, and good luck with everything you do.
Thank you very much, Mark.